my NL East all-time rosters reveal. We've made it to the National League, and this is where I get really excited because the AL's fun. The American League, I love it. Getting to break down some of those teams and build those teams. But the National League is my bread and butter here because if anyone's listened to this show, know that I'm a diehard St. Louis Cardinals fan. And these are the teams that I grew up watching because back, growing up, the way the schedule was, you only played American League teams for a couple weeks in June, and then for the rest of the year playing your division and other national league teams. The way it is now, you're playing every American League team once.
Sometimes I do get nostalgic about that, thinking about how the schedule used to be. But
yeah, and so obviously same rules apply to how we're doing these all-time teams. Obviously, looking at historical impact, legacy with the franchise, stats and accolades, postseason runs, and tenure with the franchise are all factored into the selection of these teams. And this NL East division is really great one to get started with the National League because there's a lot of passionate fan bases in this division, plenty of Hall of Famers to go around, and I would say probably the best pitching division out of all six divisions in the Major League Baseball. One note as we dive into these National League squads, unlike the AL, there are a handful of NL teams who started in the 19th century. So any players who spent their careers primarily before 1901 will not have been considered for these rosters. The game was vastly different from the number of games played, the style of play, the number of teams, or it was just like 5 or 6. And then the rules at the time were vastly different as well. So the AL also wasn't formed yet, so no players before 1901. That's the cutoff where the original 16 began. So let's get right into it. The Atlanta Braves. Obviously, plenty of Hall of Famers to go around here. The main eras are targeted. The championship year in '57 in Milwaukee, the '90s crew, which brought the first title to Atlanta in 1995, and then the more recent stars from that 2021 championship squad. So it's all here on display. Obviously, a great outfield with Hank Aaron, Andrew Jones, who just got Hall of Fame honors, and then Dale Murphy, who is another bit of a Hall of Fame snub, the two-time MVP winner for the Braves and back in the 80s. He was the face of the Braves. Again, 1980 seemed to be a rough time for Hall of Famers with Don Mattingly not being in the Hall of Fame and a couple other guys from that era just not being respected enough. Infield, it might surprise you because up the middle, that the Braves are a little weak historically at second base and shortstop. So Ozzie Albies actually gets the second base spot here. Not a lot of competition at that position. Maybe Marcus Giles, for some of you who remember him back in the 2000s, but just really not a lot of top talent to go around. And he's got the best bat of anyone at that position. And then Rafael Furcal at short. There's some older guys like dead ball era players like Rabbit Moranville, and I think a guy on the 57 championship, Johnny Logan. There's just Jeff Blauser from the 90s. We do fit him on the roster on the bench, but Rafael Furcal, I would say one of the better gloves to put at short for the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, first base, you got to have Freddie Freeman. Catcher was tough. Catcher was probably the toughest position to pick, at least for a starter. And I actually just went ahead and fit all three catchers that I was trying to decide between on the roster. So we get Brian McCann at catcher. I thought probably the best defensive wise between the three, between him, Javi Lopez, and Joe Torre. Had the best glove, and at catcher you probably just want the best defensive backstop. But Joe Torre and Javi Lopez both get on there on the bench. There was a bit of a deciding factor between Ronald Acuna Jr. and Andrew Jones. Ended up going with the longer tenured, the more consistent Andrew Jones. And Acuna's been hurt for a couple seasons and kind of on and off the field. So He's obviously a top talent, so he needs to make the roster, but elected to go Andrew Jones for the center field spot. Looking at the pitching, this is the best rotation you could probably ever have. 5 Hall of Famers, 1 through 5 here on the rotation. Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz all play together in that 90s crew. Warren Spahn, and then Phil Niekro, knuckleball legend, rounds out the starting rotation. So it's just a gold Hall of Fame-esque starting rotation for the Atlanta Braves. And I think the only rotation that does have 5 Hall of Famers that I've made for this whole series. In the bullpen, he obviously got a fireball at the closer spot with Craig Kimbrell, and then just some guys who were just very solid bullpen arms throughout championship teams, and just like dominant eras. Gene Garber, Mark Wohlers, John Rocker, and then Steve Bedrosian. And then I fit in Johnny Venters here. Had to get another lefty in. He's more of like a 2010s guy who was pretty dominant as a lefty. And then the 2 starters I fit into the bullpen. Lou Burdette was part of that 1957 World Series championship team. And then Tim Hudson, saw him on the Oakland A's all-time team last week. Late career, actually spent more seasons in Atlanta than he did Oakland. Gets a spot here on the bullpen. So, Logan, what do you think of this one?
I agree with your pitching staff. I mean, I don't. That alone kind of just makes them one of the better teams overall that you've listed. I mean, the batting rotation's got big names in it, but like you said, yeah, not star-studded in every position.
There are some weak spots.
There are definitely weak spots. I mean, they're still great players, but we're talking we're putting up standards of all-time greats. Um, so yeah, but I mean, if you can win games 1-0, then I mean, what's it?
They probably would be able
1-0, 1-0, or 8-6.
Yeah, gonna get a few home runs out of Hank Aaron at least. Um, I didn't even mention Chipper Jones, but like you get him and I was able to fit him and Eddie Matthews into the lineup, both of them at third base, but get Eddie Matthews into that DH spot. So that's a pretty dominant third base position. Probably needed to spread the love a little bit more in their franchise to maybe shortstop and second base, but that's how it turned out for them. The Miami Marlins. All right. So no Hall of Famers listed on this team. Not yet, at least. We'll see if Miguel Cabrera gets into the Hall of Fame. He should. But he'll probably get in as a Tiger. But he makes the roster here. This is actually a really fun roster because for as short a history as the Marlins have, having been around since 1993, they got 2 quick World Series titles in 97 and 2003. So a lot of the players who make this roster are part of those 2 squads. Guys like Miguel Cabrera, Derek Lee, Gary Sheffield, Jeff Conine, Mike Lowell. So a lot of those guys who contributed to World Series teams in 97 and 03 are on this roster. Juan Pierre takes center field. Is just a speedy, not a fantastic hitter, but kind of a bunt for a hit type of guy who's got a ton of speed. Had to have him on the roster. He was part of that 2003 run. But yeah, I think like not huge names, but kind of a fun roster when you throw in some more modern pieces like Giancarlo Stanton, and guys like that and Hanley Ramirez, who make this a pretty fun roster to look at. Dan Ugla on the bench, along with Christian Yelich, who we might see again in a later division. But first part of his career, he played with the Marlins, does slide into a bench spot here with the Marlins. Looking at the pitching staff, had to go with the number 1 starter with Jose Fernandez. So his career was obviously cut short with his sudden death, but he was one of the most dominant pitchers for a handful of seasons before he died, and rate-wise, just the best starter in Marlins history. Just electric stuff, sub-3 ERA, just a flamethrower, strike thrower, and racked up a ton of strikeouts just for the short time he spent with the Marlins. Um, Cy Young winner Sandy Alcantara makes this one, along with Josh Beckett, Dontrell Willis with the funky lefty delivery that he always had, and then Kevin Brown makes another rotation. Just an underrated guy who probably no one's ever heard about unless he played for your team. We had him on the Texas Rangers last week. Just played for a lot of different teams for short stints, but he was part of the championship team in '97. So, and he was a major part of that low ERA type guy. So he makes the starting rotation. As we go to the bullpen, um, just some solid guys, not huge names. Rob Nin takes the closer spot along with Antonio Alfonseca, AJ Ramos, Steve Cishek, and more recent lefty specialist Tanner Scott. And then we got we got a starter in the bullpen, Anibal Sanchez, um, Josh Johnson, and then we fit in Kyle Barraclaw as well. So, Logan, what do you think of this roster as it stacks up with most of the teams we've gone over? No Hall of Famers, but kind of a fun roster and get you some wins.
Definitely fun, especially the batting rotation. Like you recognize a lot of those names from when you read up on the World Series team, but even like 2010s, that era. But do you know how many winning seasons the Marlins have had since 2010?
Probably not many. I think
Two,
like two. Yeah, I was gonna say
and
two.
one of them was the shortened COVID year. So yeah, so definitely go heavy here. I agree, going heavy here from their two title winning teams because I mean, yeah, they've had names like they've had Stanton, like guys like that, but lately, but not much team success. So you got to go what's been successful.
There was one guy I was trying to fit on the roster, Cliff Floyd, corner outfielder, big bat, but ultimately went with Yelich on the bench. Floyd wouldn't have been on the starting lineup, but I think having Juan Pierre on the team probably helped boot him out. But definitely wanted to shout him out as well. Let's move on to the New York Mets. Two titles in their history, obviously the 1969 Miracle Mets and then the 1986 team. Again, those are going to be heavily pulled from for this team, along with the team that made it to the World Series in 2000 for that Subway Series with the Yankees, and then 2015. 2015 was another year that they made it against the Kansas City Royals. So, just looking at the lineup, some just big names. Mets have always been able to get some big names to try to help match the big names that their big brothers in the Yankees have always gotten. David Wright at third, Jose Reyes at short, Carlos Beltran in center field. That was kind of the era I grew up in, watching the Mets. That was the main core of those good Mets teams in the late 2010 or late 2000s, early 2010s. Obviously, you take from Darryl Strawberry, Keith Hernandez, and Howard Johnson on that '86 team, and then pulling Edgardo Alfonso and Mike Piazza from that 2000 team. So very strong lineup. And then you throw in the polar bear, Pete Alonso at DH, and it makes brings a lot more pop to this lineup, which is kind of maybe lower on power when it's just Piazza and Alonso and Strawberry, but definitely really good hit for average type of lineup. On the bench, you get another Hall of Famer in Gary Carter as a backup catcher to Piazza, or if you wanted to move him to catcher and have Piazza be the DH, you can always do that. That's a good versatility this team has. John Olerud, only 3 seasons with the Mets, but was really productive and was on that 2000 squad. Francisco Lindor has made this roster for me very recently because he's put up some very quality seasons with the Mets these last few years, and I think is played at least or maybe more seasons in New York now than he's played with Cleveland. So he's definitely racked up some years and some tenure with the Mets. And then Brandon Nimmo. I mentioned whenever he got dealt to the Texas Rangers this offseason that was he is one of the most underrated guys uh, in all of baseball currently and maybe even historically. And I fit him onto this roster because he has just been a super consistent bat for the Mets for a long time, and I think deserved at least a bench spot for the Mets here. On the pitching side of things, we've got some top arms. Tom Seaver, obviously Hall of Famer. Jacob deGrom, who I think will be a Hall of Famer. And then Dwight Gooden from that 86 team, headlining the starting rotation for the Mets. And then you rounded out with Jerry Koosman and Sid Fernandez, a couple of guys who were on those 69 and the 86 World Series teams. On the bullpen, got a lot of lefties, a lot more lefties than any other team's bullpen has. It's just that's how it's kind of played out for their history. That most of the top bullpen arms are left-handed pitchers. So John Franco gets the closer spot along with Billy Wagner, Jesse Orosco, and Tug McGraw as the true lefty relievers. Throw in Juris Familia and Armando Benitez, and you've got a couple strong right-handed pitching, and then the two starters in the bullpen, David Cone and Al Leiter. So, what do you think of this roster? A lot of big names. Some guys who didn't start their careers in New York, but they were definitely picked up later.
Do you think in 13 years or 14 years when Juan Soto's contract is up, he'll be on this?
Possibly. If he sticks around, he just seems to not have played very many seasons for many teams to start his career out. He's been tossed around.
Surely, if he signed a contract that's 15% of a century long, then he'll be there for at least a while. Yeah, I mean, I like it. Several guys I recognize from like the 2000s kind of era. David Wright was just a long time Met that kind of unfortunately was on some mediocre teams. Like never really had too much success. Beltran, yeah, good Met as well. Yeah, always living in the Yankees shadow, but they've still been a decent franchise overall.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's the Clippers. It's not like they've been like
Right.
the Clippers of the to the Lakers, like it's or the Angels, or the Angels to the Dodgers.
The Angels.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, yeah, Juan Soto in 13 years should theoretically be on this list. If he's not, then I would say that'd be a major disappointment.
Strong pitching. It was tough to root out some guys. Obviously, Matt Harvey, the Dark Knight, doesn't make this roster. He had two really dominant seasons to start his career, but got hurt and was never the same. So I couldn't fit him here. Noah Syndergaard, just some other names that in the Mets history. They had a lot of good pitching in their history. Johan Santana, Tom Glavine, Pedro Martinez are like guys who were really dominant for other teams, and then like ended their careers with the Mets, but weren't as dominant then. So I couldn't fit those guys on here. Moving on to the Philadelphia Phillies. This is a fun one. Got a lot of guys again, kind of the same era as the Mets core of Beltran, Wright, and Jose Reyes. Kind of pull from that same era with Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley, and Ryan Howard. So just it was a great time to be alive in the late 2000s for Major League Baseball. So all three of those guys make this roster. Yeah. When we get to the pitching staff, it's another Braves-esque pitching staff. So, yeah. So obviously Hall of Famers Mike Schmidt, Chuck Klein in right, Richie Ashburn in center, and I fit Dick Allen in left field. He's traditionally a third base, first base type of guy, but he has a secondary left field eligibility here. So I fit him out in left because his bat is too good to leave off, because I wanted to get Bryce Harper in. He's actually going into this year. He will be playing his, I think, 8th or 9th season with the Phillies, and it'll be more seasons than he spent with the Washington Nationals, which is crazy to think about. Where has the time gone? But he's put up some really good years, including an MVP with Philadelphia. So I had to fit him as he's become really a first baseman, kind of shifted from an outfield guy to a first base spot. And he's better at defense than Ryan Howard ever would be. If you look at Ryan Howard's WAR, he shouldn't even make this team, but his bat is so good. He's got that 06 MVP. So he gets the DH spot easily. On the bench, we do get Scott Rowland, Hall of Famer. We'll probably see him again on my favorite team.
Next week.
So
Next week.
next week, Bobby Abreu. Bobby Abreu was part of that core with Rollins and Utley and Howard. Wanted to fit him in the outfield, but with the maneuvering that I needed to do to fit Harper in, I couldn't fit him on the starting lineup. Um, let's go to that pitching staff. Steve Carlton, Robin Roberts, Grover Cleveland, Pete Alexander, and Cole Hamels, and Jim Bunning. So 4 Hall of Famers out of 5. Cole Hamels, I think, probably should be a Hall of Famer. Um, he'll have some years to be able to be on the ballot to get that spot. But part of that '08 World Series championship team, along with Howard and Rollins and all those guys. So it's a really, really strong starting rotation that rivals the Atlanta Braves. Mix of a couple lefties in there as well. So, looking at the bullpen, get Jonathan Papelbon again. Spent It was a couple really good years with the Phillies after some solid years with Boston. Obviously, he was the closer on my Boston all-time team, and here he shows up again. Tug McGraw once again. Funny enough, he was on the Mets '69 World Series and the uh, Phillies 1980 World Series team. So he ends up on both of these teams, and those 2 World Series spots are a big reason why. Jim Constantine, Ryan Madsen, and Ron Reed round out the true uh, relievers, and then we get 3 really big names, starters that also make this pitching staff, and Kurt Schilling, Cliff Lee, and the late Roy Halladay, Hall of Famer Roy Halladay. Halladay only spent 4 seasons and only really had 2 super strong seasons, but they were that good, especially with the no-hitter in the playoffs for the Phillies. So perfect game postseason. So obviously had to fit him in here. Said I would fit Cliff Lee onto another team because we couldn't get him on the Cleveland Guardians because a lot of great pitching there as well. And he might have won a Cy Young with Cleveland, but he was a little more dominant with the Phillies overall. So Logan, what do you think of this squad?
Yeah, pitching staff and batting rotation. Just a lot of guys from that late 2000s, early 2010s Phillies era. Yeah, that pitching staff back then was insane with Hamels, Holiday, and Lee, and Papelbon. Had all those guys. Yeah, I mean, it's them and the Braves are currently fighting for the top spot right now in the NL East for all-time team, in my opinion. We shall see what the Nationals have to bring to see if they can compete with these 2 teams.
Last team, Washington Nationals. Got some Hall of Famers in the lineup, obviously, and definitely have to note, got some Montreal Expos. This is where they started their franchise. So if you're seeing Montreal Expos players, that's why. Tim Raines, Vladimir Guerrero, Andre Dawson, Gary Carter. Those are the Hall of Famers that make this roster. So some heavy pull from the Montreal days, but we do get Bryce Harper, Ryan Zimmerman, and Anthony Rendon, along with Trey Turner from Rendon and Turner, obviously from that 2019 squad that brought the first championship. To Washington. And then on the bench, we do have Larry Walker, who we'll probably see again. And look at there's Juan Soto. He made it onto the Nationals. I mean, obviously had some really good years with them. It wasn't a long tenure, but he's a generational hitter, and that's really the team he's probably spent the longest with until he finishes out this contract with the Mets. But yeah, I think a solid squad pulling from when you can pull from Montreal, it definitely makes this a much better core on this team. If you were to just pull from Washington,
Well, yeah, because they've been historically bad, except that brief 2019 run.
yeah. Looking at the pitching staff, again pulling from that 2019 squad, Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, and then looky there, Pedro Martinez, Hall of Famer, obviously was on the Boston Red Sox all-time team, but he did have an historic peak here with the Montreal Expos, as he did win a Cy Young. So 1997 Cy Young with Montreal. So he definitely makes this rotation along with Dennis Martinez, no relation there, and then Steve Rogers, Captain America, definitely one of the best starters in Expos history. Great mustache too. In the bullpen, It's not as sexy here. Chad Cordero takes the closer spot, but is backed up by Jeff Reardon, Tyler Clippard, Sean Doolittle, Drew Storen. Those are the true relievers. And then we fit in 3 starters. Gio Gonzalez, who was part of that 2019 squad, and then Jordan Zimmerman as well, part of that team, and then Levon Hernandez, who actually played a little as an Expo and a little bit as a National when they made their move. So cross franchise player right there. So not definitely not the strongest team, but I think got a lot of good pieces again in the lineup. I think there's some really good lineups here, but I do like the rotation with Scherzer, Strasburg, and Martinez.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Scherzer, Strauss. Sure, you think Scherzer's Hall of Fame
Definitely
worthy?
one of the top 3 pitchers of this last generation, along with Kershaw and Verlander.
Yeah, so I mean, you got the and then Strasburg was also pretty good in his time. So, yeah, I not as good as Braves and Phillies, but yeah, just like I said, the national since they've been in Washington, they've really not seen much success. So that kind of hampers their this team's greatness, pulling from some mediocre teams. But yeah, that 2019 team is sometimes it's a recent team. It's a recent champion that just kind of gets forgotten. But I remember really enjoying their run though. I looking back on it, like, yeah, that was actually one of my favorite new like just as a neutral fan, that was kind of one of my favorite teams to watch. So yeah, well, I guess that wraps up the NL East.
Sure does. We'll be back next week with the NL Central.